Harlem, 1934. The room went silent when Bumpy Johnson walked through that door. Not the good kind of silent, the kind where 15 white men in hoods stop talking, stop breathing, and reach for the guns under their robes. They were having a Klan meeting in the basement of an abandoned warehouse near the Harlem River, on the edge of his territory, in his neighborhood. The Grand Dragon stood up slowly. "Boy, you just made the biggest mistake of your..." Bumpy didn't let him finish. What happened in the next 8 minutes would become legend. 15 men walked into that meeting. Only 3 walked out, and those 3 spent the rest of their lives wishing they hadn't. This is the story of the night Bumpy Johnson taught the KKK that Harlem wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a kingdom, and kings don't ask permission. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand what Harlem was facing in early 1934. The Depression had hit Black America harder than anyone. Unemployment in Harlem was pushing 50%. Families were getting evicted. Kids were going hungry. And into that desperation, the Ku Klux Klan saw opportunity. See, the Klan wasn't just a Southern problem. By the 1930s, they had chapters all over the North: New York, Chicago, Detroit, places where Black folks had migrated looking for freedom, only to find the same hatred had followed them. In Harlem, the Klan's strategy was different than down south. They couldn't openly march in white robes through Black neighborhoods without getting torn apart, so they operated in the shadows. Anonymous threats slipped under doors, crosses burned on rooftops in the dead of night, Black businesses finding their windows smashed, their inventory destroyed, no witnesses, no arrests. And the NYPD? They did nothing. Some of them were probably Klan members themselves. By February 1934, Harlem's community leaders were scared. Pastors were preaching about faith, but sleeping with guns. Business owners were hiring armed guards. Parents were walking their children to school in groups. The Klan was winning through terror, and nobody seemed able to stop them. Nobody except one man. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was 28 years old in 1934. He'd been in Harlem for almost 10 years, working his way up from street enforcer to becoming one of the most respected operators in the numbers racket. But Bumpy was different from other gangsters. He didn't just take from the community, he protected it. When white landlords tried to evict Black families who couldn't pay rent, Bumpy paid it. When crooked cops shook down Black businesses, Bumpy made sure those cops got transferred. When outside gangs tried to move into Harlem, Bumpy sent them back in ambulances. To the people of Harlem, Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a criminal, he was a protector. A man who'd grown up fighting, who'd done time in prison, who'd learned the hard way that respect isn't given, it's taken. And when the Klan started terrorizing Harlem, Bumpy Johnson took it personally. February 7th, 1934, one day before the meeting. Bumpy was sitting in the back room of Small's Paradise, a jazz club on 135th Street, when one of his most valuable assets walked in. Marcus, a light-skinned man who could pass for white when he needed to, which made him perfect for the kind of intelligence work Bumpy needed done in a city divided by color. Marcus looked tense. "Mr. Johnson, I got something you need to know about." Bumpy gestured for him to sit. "Talk." "I've been tailing that Klansman like you asked. The one who's been distributing threats in the neighborhood. Name's William Hawkins. Been following him for 3 days. Bumpy leaned forward. "And?" "Tonight he met with others, white men in expensive cars. I stayed back, watched them go into that abandoned warehouse near the Harlem River, the one on the edge by 145th, industrial area. I counted 15 men going in. They're having some kind of meeting right now." Marcus pulled out a small notebook. "I wrote down the license plates. Connecticut, New Jersey, Bronx. These aren't local boys. This is organized." Bumpy studied the notebook. 15 men, warehouse by the river, far enough from busy streets that nobody would hear anything, close enough to escape routes if they needed to run. Did you see what they brought in? Wooden cross, 6 feet tall, gasoline cans, and everyone was armed. This isn't just a meeting, Mr. Johnson. They're planning something big. Bumpy was quiet for a long moment, his mind working through the implications. The Klan wasn't just threatening anymore. They were preparing for action, probably planning to hit multiple targets at once. Churches, businesses, maybe even homes. He looked up at Marcus. "You did good work. Real good." He pulled out his wallet, counted out $200 and handed it to Marcus. "But now you forget everything you saw. You weren't there. You didn't follow anybody. Understand?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson." Marcus took the money, understanding exactly what Bumpy was about to do, and disappeared into the night. After he left, Bumpy sat alone in that back room for 2 hours. His closest associates, men he'd fought beside for years, offered to come with him, offered to bring guns, bring men, bring whatever he needed. Bumpy refused. "This ain't about firepower," he said quietly. "This is about sending a message, and that message needs to come from one man, me." His lieutenant, a man named Illinois Gordon, tried to argue. "Bump, you're talking about walking into a room with 15 Klansmen. They're going to be armed. They're planning something big. You walk in there, they'll kill you before you can blink." Bumpy smiled, that cold smile that made people uncomfortable. "They're not expecting me at all, and that's why I'm walking out, and they're not." February 8th, 1934, 11:30 p.m. Bumpy Johnson walked through Harlem's streets alone. He wore a gray wool suit, a black fedora, and a long coat that concealed what he was carrying underneath. The temperature had dropped to 28 degrees. His breath came out in clouds. The streets were mostly empty, just a few late-night stragglers hurrying home, heads down against the cold. As he walked east toward the river, the neighborhood changed. The vibrant storefronts and brownstones of central Harlem gave way to darker, emptier streets. Closed factories, abandoned warehouses, the industrial wasteland where Harlem met the Harlem River. This was the forgotten edge of the neighborhood, where the city dumped things it wanted to forget, where men like the Klan could meet without being noticed. He reached the warehouse on the edge of Harlem at 11:35. It was a 3-story brick building that sat in the industrial zone near the Harlem River, that forgotten stretch where Harlem's vibrant streets gave way to abandoned factories and empty lots. The warehouse had once housed a textile factory before the Depression shut it down. Now it was just another shell in this no-man's land between Harlem and the river, far enough from busy streets that screams wouldn't carry, close enough to the 145th Street Bridge that white men could escape to the Bronx if things went wrong. Perfect location for cowards who wanted to plan terror without being seen. Bumpy circled the building once, noting the details. 2 cars parked in the alley behind it. Expensive cars, Buicks and Cadillacs, not the kind of vehicles you'd see in Harlem normally. White men's cars, Connecticut and New Jersey plates, just like Marcus had said. One entrance in the front, boarded up. One loading dock entrance in the back, door slightly ajar. That's where they'd gone in. Bumpy checked his watch, 11:40. He stood in the shadows for 5 minutes, listening. From inside he could hear voices, muffled but distinct, men talking, laughing, the sound of furniture being moved. They were setting up. At 11:45, Bumpy pulled his coat tighter, adjusted his fedora, and walked toward that loading dock door. He didn't knock. He simply pulled the door open and walked inside. The basement was lit by kerosene lamps hanging from the ceiling. 15 men in white robes and hoods stood around a wooden table covered with maps of Harlem. In the corner, a wooden cross, 6 feet tall, waiting to be carried out and burned. They were in the middle of planning. The Grand Dragon, a man named Robert Garrison from Connecticut, was pointing at the map, assigning targets. "Thompson, you take the church. Wait until their Wednesday service lets out, then—" He stopped mid-sentence because Bumpy Johnson was standing in the doorway. The room went silent. 15 white hoods turned toward that door. 15 men who'd been laughing and planning and feeling invincible suddenly froze. Because they'd been so careful. They'd chosen an abandoned building in the industrial zone where nobody went at night. They'd posted no guards because who would think to look for them here? They'd kept their meeting secret from everyone except trusted members. And yet somehow, impossibly, a black man in a gray suit was standing in their doorway, looking at him like he owned the place. Robert Garrison was the first to recover. He was a businessman from Stamford, Connecticut, who ran Klan operations in New York and New Jersey. He'd organized dozens of these meetings, had burned dozens of crosses, had terrorized black communities from Baltimore to Boston. He'd never been challenged before. Garrison pulled back his hood, revealing a thin face with wire-rimmed glasses and a contemptuous smile. "Boy, you just made the biggest mistake of your—" Bumpy held up one hand. The gesture was so calm, so authoritative, that Garrison actually stopped talking. "Before you finish that sentence," Bumpy said, his voice quiet and steady, "I want you to understand something. You picked the wrong neighborhood." One of the Klansmen, younger, more impulsive, reached for the pistol on his hip. Bumpy didn't move, didn't flinch, just looked at the young man and said, "You pull that gun, you better use it, because if you don't kill me with the first shot, you won't get a second." The young man's hand froze. Garrison tried to regain control. "There's 15 of us, one of you. Even if you got a gun under that coat, you'd be dead before you could draw it. So I suggest you turn around, walk out that door, and forget you ever saw us here." Bumpy tilted his head slightly. "See, that's where you made your mistake. You assumed I came here to negotiate." He took 3 steps into the room, slow, deliberate, his hands still visible, still empty. "You've been terrorizing my neighborhood for months, burning crosses, breaking windows, threatening families. You thought we were too scared to fight back. You thought because you're white, because you got hoods and guns, because you got the police protecting you, that you could do whatever you wanted. Another step. You were wrong." Garrison's confidence was starting to crack. "Listen, boy, stop calling me boy." Bumpy's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "My name's Bumpy Johnson, and after tonight, every Klan member from here to Mississippi is gonna know that name, because you 15 are gonna be a lesson." One of the Klansmen, a heavy-set man with a southern accent, stepped forward. "We don't need to listen to this. Let's just kill this uppity—" He never finished the sentence. What happened next was brutal, efficient, and terrifying. Bumpy moved, not with the wild, desperate violence of a man fighting for his life, with the calculated precision of someone who'd been planning this moment for hours, who knew exactly what he was going to do before he walked through that door. The heavy-set Klansman reached for his gun, but Bumpy had already closed the distance. One punch to the throat, crushing the windpipe. The man went down, gasping, drowning on air. The young Klansman who'd reached for his gun earlier finally drew it, but his hands were shaking, and the shot went wild, punching a hole in the brick wall behind Bumpy. Bumpy grabbed a kerosene lamp from the table and threw it. The glass shattered against the young man's chest. The kerosene ignited from the flame. The man screamed, dropping his gun, trying to pat out the fire spreading across his robe. Now the room erupted into chaos. 15 men trying to draw guns, trying to rush Bumpy, trying to escape through the only door that Bumpy was now blocking. But here's what they didn't know, what nobody except Bumpy's closest associates knew. Bumpy Johnson had grown up fighting, not street fights, real fights, prison fights where you fought to survive, where second place meant dead. He learned from the best, from old-timers in Sing Sing who taught him that fighting wasn't about strength, it was about leverage, timing, brutality applied to vulnerable spots, throat, eyes, knees, groin. Bumpy didn't waste energy on body shots or fancy moves. He went for places that destroyed a man's ability to fight back. Robert Garrison tried to rally his men. "Spread out! Surround him! He's just one—" Bumpy grabbed the wooden cross from the corner, 6 feet of solid oak. He swung it like a baseball bat. The cross connected with Garrison's head. The sound was like a watermelon splitting. Garrison went down and didn't get back up. 3 Klansmen rushed Bumpy at once. He used the cross as a spear, driving the pointed end into the first man's stomach, used the leverage to swing the cross around, catching the second man across the face. The third man got close enough to grab Bumpy's coat. Bumpy dropped the cross, pulled a straight razor from his pocket, and opened the man's face from eye to jaw. The man screamed and stumbled back, blood pouring through his fingers. The kerosene fire from the lamp was spreading now. The abandoned building's dry wood was catching fast. Smoke was filling the basement. The remaining Klansmen were coughing, stumbling, trying to see through the smoke and the chaos. Bumpy moved through that smoke like he could see through it, like he'd memorized the room's layout before the fire started, because he had. One by one, the Klansmen went down. Some from Bumpy's fists, some from friendly fire as panicked men shot at shadows, some from the smoke and fire. The whole thing took 8 minutes. 8 minutes from the time Bumpy walked in until the time the last Klansman capable of moving crawled toward the door. When the smoke cleared enough to see, 3 men were still alive. Not unharmed, all 3 had injuries, broken bones, burns, cuts, but alive. 12 bodies lay on that basement floor, some dead from violence, some from smoke inhalation, some from the fire that was now consuming the building. Bumpy stood near the door, breathing hard, his suit torn, blood on his hands and face, not all of it his own. He looked at the 3 survivors. 2 were crawling toward the exit. 1 was just lying there, whimpering, unable to move. Bumpy walked over to them, knelt down next to the closest one, a man whose hood had fallen off, revealing a face that couldn't have been more than 25 years old. "What's your name?" Bumpy asked quietly. The man was crying. Patrick Murphy." "You from around here, Patrick?" "Bronx." "You got family?" Patrick nodded, still crying. Bumpy grabbed him by the collar, pulled him close. "Then you go home to them, tonight, and you tell every Klan member you know what happened here. You tell them Bumpy Johnson walked into a meeting of 15 men and walked out alone. You tell them what happens when you terrorize Harlem." He released Patrick, who scrambled toward the exit. Bumpy turned to the other 2 survivors. "Same goes for you. Get out. Spread the word. The Klan's not welcome in Harlem. Not now, not ever." The 3 men crawled, stumbled, and dragged themselves up the stairs and out of that burning building. Bumpy followed them slowly, looking back one last time at the 12 bodies lying in that basement, at the burning cross that had been meant to terrorize Harlem's families, at the maps and the plans that would never be executed. He walked out into the cold February night, leaving the building to burn behind him. The flames reflected off the dark waters of the Harlem River as Bumpy disappeared into the industrial shadows, heading back toward the heart of his kingdom. By morning, the warehouse was a smoking ruin. Firefighters found 12 bodies in the basement. The NYPD sent detectives. They questioned the 3 survivors in the hospital. Patrick Murphy and the other 2 gave vague, conflicting stories. "We don't know who attacked us. It was too dark. Everything happened so fast." But the detectives found the remnants: white robes, Ku Klux Klan literature, maps of Harlem with black churches and businesses marked, the wooden cross half burned. The lead detective, a man named Sullivan, sat in the police captain's office with his report. 12 dead white men, all Klan members, killed during an illegal meeting where they were planning terrorist attacks against Negro civilians in Harlem. The captain read the report slowly, then looked up at Sullivan. "What are you recommending?" Sullivan knew what he was being asked. "We could investigate further, try to find who did this. But sir, if we do that, this becomes public. Newspapers will report that the Ku Klux Klan was operating in New York, planning attacks in Harlem. That's going to be a scandal. City Hall won't like it, the mayor's office won't like it, and it'll make us look bad, like we didn't know the Klan was operating under our noses." The captain was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up the report and dropped it in his desk drawer. "Accidental fire, illegal gathering of vagrants in an abandoned building. No arrests, case closed." Sullivan nodded. "Yes, sir." And that's how 12 Ku Klux Klan members died in Harlem, and nobody was ever charged, because the NYPD decided that a scandal about the Klan operating in New York was worse than letting a killer walk free, especially when that killer had done what the police should have been doing all along, protecting Harlem from terrorists. The 3 survivors kept their promise. They told everyone what happened. Patrick Murphy went back to the Bronx and told his Klan chapter. Word spread to other chapters, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. The story got bigger with each telling. Some versions said Bumpy had killed all 15 men with his bare hands. Some said he'd burned them alive intentionally. Some said he'd made them beg before he let the survivors go. The truth was bad enough. Within a week, the Klan's operations in Harlem stopped completely. No more threats, no more burned crosses, no more broken windows. The white-hooded cowards who terrorized the neighborhood from the shadows decided that Harlem was too dangerous for them. Because Bumpy Johnson had taught them something they'd never learned before. Black people could fight back, and when they did, the Klan bled the same as anyone else. The night of February 8, 1934, became legend in Harlem. People told the story for decades about the night Bumpy Johnson walked into a Klan meeting alone and walked out alive, while 15 white men didn't. But the story meant different things to different people. To Harlem's families, it meant protection. It meant someone was willing to fight for them when nobody else would. To other criminals, it meant respect. It meant Bumpy Johnson wasn't just another gangster. He was a man willing to die for his principles. To white people who thought they could come into black neighborhoods and do whatever they wanted, it meant fear. It meant there were consequences for terror. It meant Harlem had a protector who didn't play by their rules. And to Bumpy himself? Years later, in the 1960s, a reporter asked him about that night, asked him if the story was true, if he really walked into a Klan meeting alone. Bumpy smiled, that same cold smile from that February night. "Let me tell you something about respect," he said. "You don't get it by asking nicely. You don't get it by being reasonable. You get it by making it clear that disrespecting you costs more than people are willing to pay." So yes, I walked into that meeting, and yes, most of them didn't walk out, because they came to Harlem to spread fear, and I taught them what real fear looks like. The reporter asked if he had any regrets. Bumpy's expression didn't change. Only one. I wish I could have sent a clearer message. But 3 survivors were enough to spread the word. The Klan learned that Harlem wasn't afraid of them. They should have been afraid of Harlem. February 8, 1934. 15 men walked into a basement wearing white hoods, carrying guns, planning to terrorize innocent families. One man walked in after them. No hood, no army behind him, just his fists, his rage, and his absolute refusal to let his community be terrorized. 8 minutes later, 12 men were dead. 3 crawled out to spread the warning, and Bumpy Johnson walked out into the cold night, past the abandoned factories and empty lots, back toward the heart of Harlem, where his people were sleeping safely because of what he'd just done. That's not just a gangster story. That's a story about what happens when people decide they won't be victims anymore, when they decide that fear is a choice and they choose something else. The Klan thought Harlem was weak, thought black people would just accept their terror and bow their heads. They learned different that night, and they never came back. If this story got you, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you want more Bumpy Johnson stories that history tried to bury. These are the moments that made Harlem legendary. Drop a comment. What would you have done in Bumpy's position? Walk in alone or bring backup? And turn on notifications because we're dropping these legendary Bumpy Johnson stories every week. Next up, how Bumpy Johnson made Lucky Luciano himself show respect. Remember, respect isn't given, it's taken. And Bumpy Johnson took his on February 8th, 1934.